Hello, baby. Welcome to the Smart People Podcast. Sit back, grab a drink, tune in your brain.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
This nation will rise up.
One giant leap for mankind. 760.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Smart People Podcast. This is one of your hosts, Chris Stemp.
And I'm John Rojas.
He's another host. Today, we're going to talk to you about how to change anything. Change things in your life that you believe need change and how to stick to your guns, actually make it happen. Oftentimes, I'd say the largest things that people like to change, they try and diet, they go to the gym, they want to work out, they want to find work-life balance, things like this. And today's guest is going to tell you how to enact that change and actually make it happen.
Today we'll be interviewing Kerry Patterson, the author of Change Anything, the New Science of Personal Success. Kerry is the co-founder of Vital Smarts, which is a corporate training and organizational performance company. And he also did his doctoral work in organizational behavior at Stanford University.
I really like talking to Kerry. One of the things I found most interesting about what he had to say and his book is that most people attribute what they can and can't do to willpower. I know I'm like that. I'm pretty stubborn. If I feel like if I say, I'm going to do this, it's just because I have all this willpower. And half the time I don't end up doing it. And I just attribute that to, something better came up or whatever.
Or laziness.
Or laziness, and never really look at the external forces. And he talks about those external forces. And like, for example, John, I know you and I, when we were living out in Arizona, we were really into working out, eating right, eating healthy. And I don't know about you, but I was probably in the best shape of my life.
Oh, yeah. So was I. Completely agree.
And it was because when I would come home and I'd be like, dude, I'm lazy, I'm tired, I'm not lifting, you would, call me a fat kid or something and motivate me to go. And I just think that that's one of the things he talks about. That's a motivational factor that you can change in your life. Get somebody on your team who's going to help you out. And I think we've all kind of seen those type of results. And he gives you more step-by-step ways to do it. And he talks about all those things in the book and a little bit in the interview.
I completely agree. And one of the other things that we mentioned in the interview is, I had an iPhone app that counted the streak for how many days we went to the gym.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I used to remember looking at it every day being like, all right, we're at 14 days. We got to make, we got to get 15 or we got to get 16, whatever it may be. But that definitely did help in the process as well.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that he kind of alludes to is you document your progress or you make it publicly known, which you said you did that on Facebook. You told everybody in the group what you're doing. And then when you don't do it, you feel more like a failure than if nobody knows. So these are all really good things that you can use to change anything from quitting smoking or, like we said, dietary changes. There's so many things you could do. And I'm sure if you evaluate your life, everybody wants to change something, small or large. So this might help you out. So hopefully you can take a listen and make your life better through the process.
Before we move on to the interview, I do have to say that another way to improve your life is using our Amazon widget on smartpeoplepodcast.com.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, you can go on there. You can buy your vitamins. There's different weightlifting apparatuses you can pick up on there. So if you're, trying to lose weight, you can pick up a scale on there to track it every single day. You can pick up anything.
What was that total gym thing you have that does pull-ups and sit-ups or whatever? What's that thing?
The Iron Gym, maybe?
Yeah, you can pick up one of those on sale, actually, because I almost got one. Those are pretty good.
Oh, they're great.
So just use our Amazon widget, no cost to you. It's in the bottom left-hand corner of our website, which is smartpeoplepodcast.com. Go there, click on the Amazon icon. It'll give us a little kickback that Amazon pays for. We really appreciate it.
Now enjoy the interview with Kerry Patterson.
Kerry, first, I just wanted to give our listeners a little background on you, what it is that you do, and how it is you got to be, a well-known author.
Well, I left Stanford University about 35 years ago, threw myself into organizations and trying to figure out, what would it take to actually change these places. These are organizations typically that were sort of led by authoritarian leaders, very unhealthy. Began to study what it took to change behavior. Began to write books about that. I wrote a book called Crucial Conversations, where we looked at how do you talk to people when stakes are high. Then eventually moved to the realm of self-help. What does it take to change yourself? We recently studied 5,000 people who had successfully changed something in their life, people who had struggled for years, weight loss, spending addictions, bad habits at work, etc., had found a way to wrestle those to the ground and had been successful for 3 to 5 years. And said, what do they have in common? And we shared that in our book, Change Anything.
The new book you have out is called Change Anything, The New Science of Personal Success. I was hoping you could give us a little insight into that and also tell us what you mean by the new science.
Well, what we mean by the new science is, in addition to studying these 5,000 changers, we poured over 17,000 articles and looked at what the most contemporary scientific research revealed around personal change as well. There's a time in the behavioral sciences, frankly, when we were kind of like witchcraft and alchemy. A lot of the work done 50 years ago didn't really yield much result. But as of late, there's been terrific studies by a variety of people in a variety of locations who've really been able to demonstrate change. For example, William Miller, who deals with addiction, rather than typical 3 to 6% success rate, experiences in the 70 to 80% success. Mimi Selbert, who works with people who've been to jail 17 times or more, felony convictions, has a 91% success rate. And so the new science looks at the new research around that. Our first finding when it came to personal change, though, to answer your question more specifically, was that people fell into what we call the willpower trap. They thought if they just used enough willpower, they could overcome anything. Build me a house of cupcakes next to a lake of hot fudge, and I can eat vegetables and low-fat, meat all day long because that's how strong I am. That's just plain wrong. It turns out people can't. In a recent study, we found that people who used but one tactic, and if that tactic was willpower, they mostly failed. In fact, if you use 6 or more tactics, and this was the big finding, you were 10 times more likely to succeed. If you can come up with 6 tactics of influencing your personal behavior, you're 10 times more likely to succeed than those who just try to gut it out.
Wow. Yeah, and I looked through your book and I saw those 6 different tactics. And I'll tell you, one thing that really stuck out to me was you said off-the-shelf answers oftentimes won't solve our problems because they're unique things to us. And I like that because a lot of times, I like to think of new ideas and new business plans, and I look to see, has it been done? And if so, was it successful? And what I find is it's almost always been done, and then it's discouraging because you're like, well, it's already out there. Let's move on to the next thing. But what you're saying, and I'd like you to go more in depth, is you should stop looking at things that have already been done, like you say, off-the-shelf answers.
Well, it turns out, as you study the people who had failed for a while and then found a way to succeed, they broke from the habit of sort of taking their friend's one best idea and trying it and said, you know what, I'm going to start with myself, and I'll be the scientist, and I'll be the subject. So the second principle is be the scientist and the subject. That is you studying you. And so here's what you study. I in the process of writing this book, decided I needed to, physician heal myself, and I'm quite overweight. And so I said, I got to figure out how to, lose weight, and what can I do to, to study myself. I've subsequently lost 60 pounds on my way to losing 100, so it's been quite successful. Yeah. And so the first thing you look at is you look for what we call your crucial moments. What are the times of day that you suffer with your bad habit? It turns out most bad habits aren't a function of being tempted 24/7. They usually come down to a few crucial times during the day. Smokers when they're driving home from work, drinkers when they stop by their friend's house. There are these crucial moments. And once you've identified the crucial moments, in my particular case, I mastered breakfast. That was easy. Snack time was fine. Lunch, I was cool. Dinner, I was okay. Then came 8 o'clock in the evening, sitting down in the old Barca lounger reading, and that refrigerator's calling to me. And so I had to come up with a plan that suited my needs, and the first thing I had to deal with for me was 8 o'clock in the evening and snack time.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. It calls to me from the refrigerator. I swear.
Me too.
And so, but the point I'm making here isn't that that's what you need to do in terms of your diet. In fact, who knows, first of all, whether you want to lose weight or at all, but whatever your change plan is, you have to study you, and you start by looking at where are the points that it's called positive and negative deviance. When am I successful? What did I do that time? When did I fail? What did I do that time? I later found out when I went to a restaurant with friends, I was in trouble again. I found out how to. I took some steps to manage that. I took steps to manage my 8 o'clock in the evening. I used distance, moved the old Barca lounger down to the TV downstairs. In my case, moving 50 feet away from the refrigerator dropped my evening consumption by about 80%.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the physicality. Then I put my kitchen on a diet. What I mean by that was, Brian Wansink, who's sort of the expert on eating habits and why we eat what we eat, suggested that we now eat on plates that are the size of our grandparents' platters, that can increase how much we eat by as much as 30%. So I changed, my platters and my plates and bowls and spoons and etc. And sort of one by one, sort of step by step, I applied various techniques that I read about that made sense to me under my circumstances and the problem I was facing. I became the scientist, I became the subject, and I tailored the program to me.
One of the things that you mentioned is the social motivation, and I've found that groups on Facebook, different websites, anywhere that you can join a group to help accomplish a goal. Because I know I did like a little diet thing where I was trying to lose 15 pounds, and I ended up talking to a bunch of people on Facebook, and we were sharing pictures of what we were eating, recipes, and just kind of motivating each other on a day-to-day basis. And I found that to be a huge help with that. So what have you seen, with these new websites and social media tools that helps, during this, I guess, social motivation process?
Let me first of all frame the social motivation within this, is because it comprises 2 of the 6 sources that we refer to in our book. I suggested if you use 6 similar methods, you're 10 times more likely to change. The first methods deal with personal. That is, how do I change myself in terms of what I like and don't like, what I can and can't do. The second 2 deal with social, which is the one you're referring to. What motivates me socially, what enables me socially. And then the final one is dealing with the space around you, the physicality, what motivates and enables me. So now to answer your question of those 2 sources around how people help me, they're a profound source for most of us in both motivating and enabling us. We are social animals, and people can help us in a variety of ways. I, for example, got myself a personal coach. And I thought the personal coach would help me, learn how to lift weights, which was true. I didn't know how to do that very well, and I could hurt myself. But he started posting what I was doing. He had charts. He put them up on the wall. I'd walk into the place after and he'd weigh me in. I'd lost another 3 pounds, and he'd walk me out into the gym and announce and ring a bell and say, he's lost 2 more pounds. This guy became a real force in my life and affected many of the various motivators and enablers that help you change. And so that's what happens with the people around you. Some motivate, they're cheerleaders. Others are models, and they inspire you by how they behave. Others teach you what to do. So you're suggesting they would send you recipes. They play the role of a coach in the sense that they're giving you feedback on what works and what doesn't work. And what we found out we have to do, and particularly with serious addiction problems, drinking and drugs and the like, many people have to transform people who are currently their friends but not acting like friends, are acting like accomplices. And they have to take these accomplices, these people who encourage them to eat inappropriately or to shoot up or to smoke, and whatever they're trying to deal with, and sit down with them and say, I need you to move from being an accomplice to being a friend. I really need you to help me do the right things rather than do the wrong things. And that's a very important skill set, is transforming an accomplice into a friend. So all of this is part and parcel of this whole social milieu you're referring to. We created a website called changeanything.com with one of the major purposes being helping people connect with other people who are facing the same problem.
We will put a link to changeanything.com up on our website as well, so our listeners can go check that out. Also, I wanted to ask you, and I know we've probably touched on it so far this interview, but you talk about invisible sources of influence, and I was hoping you could tell us what you mean by that, and then give some examples of what those invisible sources are so that we might be able to spot them in our own lives.
Let me suggest how we sort of stumbled on this. We were watching people as they were trying to change, and we thought, what if we manipulated elements within their environment to get them to behave differently? We brought some research subjects into a room, had them earn money through simple games, and then gave them chances to either save or spend that money. We then manipulated posters on the wall, what people around them said, the incentive system, the tools for which they could calculate how much they've saved or spent. We manipulated all those into two conditions, one group of people to spend their money, one group to save their money, to see if we could actually get them to change. And it turns out the spenders spent like 4 times more than the savers did. It worked exactly like we thought. Then we asked the spenders, well, gosh, what happened? Each of these, by the way, each of these groups vowed that they were going to set aside their money for something more important. That was part of our setup. And so we asked them, how come you spent all your money? And every one of them blamed willpower. They just said, I just didn't have enough moxie. When we asked the people who saved, why were you successful in saving? They gave credit to willpower. And they didn't see the other sources around them. They didn't recognize the peer pressure that was being exerted. They didn't see the effect of the posters, the tools that we provided, et cetera. They just were blind to them. Wansink, in his book on eating, it suggests that most of the things that are affecting our eating habits, as I suggested earlier, are everything from the location of your chair to the size of your plates, to just eating with other people. You eat 30% more if you have 3 people with you. You eat like 60% more if you have 5 people with you. People don't recognize these sources and are greatly impacted by them. So what we try to do in the book is make them more visible. So they aren't blind and outnumbered. They become able to see the 6 sources of influence. And then instead of having them work against them, as I was suggesting, turning an accomplice into a friend, you can take those very forces and use them in your favor. I used distance that was working against me in my favor by moving the Barca lounger 50 feet away.
One of the parts of the book mentions how to change your career and how to get unstuck at work. I find it, more and more common that the people that I run into at my job and other friends that have different jobs feel like they're in a position where, they're just not happy with their lives in terms of their career. What type of advice can you give, first on how to notice these things and what those initial steps can be to become unstuck?
So, step number 1 is, as you're suspicious that you're not getting the advances that you should be getting, the promotions, the job assignments, and perhaps they're just projects that certain people are getting you're not. You need to go directly to your supervisor and say, help me understand from my own career path, what I need to do differently, and then work with them on identifying specific behavioral behaviors that are at risk. And behaviors range everything from, mood control. Sometimes you're not getting promoted because you're angry at times. The 3 most common reasons people don't do well is because they don't do 3 things well. Here's the 3 things everyone needs to do. So let me just start off with that. You need to be very proficient in what you've been hired to do. That's the obvious one. It's obvious it is. There are lots of people who are hired in writing ad copy who aren't all that good in writing ad copy or writing code, etc. And so the first issue is you have to ask yourself, am I crackerjack? Am I right on target when it comes to the skills I've been hired to do? The second issue, and this is a lot less clear to people, but comes straight out of the career and success literature, you need to be adding to the elements of the organization that help solve its biggest problems. If you look at Jeff Pfeffer wrote work years ago, 30, 40 years ago, sort of talked about people helping an organization deal with their critical uncertainty. If sales are at risk and you can't get your sales number up, you better be part of the team who's improving sales numbers if you expect to be highly valued in the organization. Be part of those projects that are helping solve the company's biggest problems. Third area is you need to be seen as a team player. That is someone who's willing to pitch in and help out other friends, colleagues, and other employees willingly, rather than being selfish and sticking to your own task. So, know your job, work on the critical jobs within the company, and be a team player. Now, having said that, you're still going to have to go back to your boss, identify other areas they may be at risk, and start working on those as well.
That was great advice. I'm really glad John asked that question because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. I know you give some real world examples in your book, and like you said, you kind of based the science off of people who have made it work in the past. Were there any real world stories about people who have made change that stuck out in your mind that you could share with us?
I talked with a fellow and ended up flying him out here to the Mountain West where we live, a guy named Michael Vitalian, and he had started off as a heavy drinker, shifted over to drugs, you know where the story is going. I mean, from drugs, it was like how to get money for drugs, and then he starts stealing, and he loses his family, he loses his job, he loses everything. He finds himself rock bottom, in jail, in somewhere in Arizona, and falls to his knees and says, "Oh Lord, spare me," and then has this huge transformation. In his words, that was his defining moment, and everything worked from that point on. What was intriguing about him, and actually another dozen people like him who I interviewed, was every one of them attributed, and goes back to the willpower trap, they attribute it to this moment where all of a sudden they gained this huge desire to change, and when they hit rock bottom and had this epiphany, they changed. And yet when you explored and followed up and said, well, gee, Michael, tell me, so you just never drank again? Well, he said, well, actually, when I got out of prison this time, my mother let me come live with her. My dad had passed away, and my dad wouldn't let me come home. So now I went home, and she introduced me to a guy next door who was a member of a 12-step program, and he started identifying each of these 6 sources we talk about, how they came to play and how they were able to then motivate and enable themselves in much more effective and proficient ways than before. And that once again, they would give themselves credit by saying there was a moment at which I gained enough courage to gut it out, and then described how they didn't gut it out. What they did was they changed their environment. This fellow, Michael Vitale, he had a transformation conversation with his friends and said, I can't drink with you anymore. And 3 of them said, tough. And he had to find new friends. And he joined a 12-step program. That was the friendship issue you referred to earlier. He took liquor out of his home. And just step by step, by each of the 6 sources, he changed his life by bringing more sources of influence to bear. That's the only way he can do it.
Great. Okay. And then this might go along with that. And so if you don't have anything specific, that's fine. But do you have the number one or the biggest piece of advice you could give our listeners to start off to make change? Is there something that is the first trigger kind of?
Well, I think that, I'm actually going, because I've been telling you some things, stop, study yourself, identify your crucial moments and say, oh, that's what I needed, identify what you need to do, bring sources to bear to change those moments. I think the hardest part is when you fail. And, people, and even the word fail is wrong. When you face a setback, you have to be prepared for setbacks. So, you've taken off 10 or 15 pounds, you haven't smoked for 3 days, and then boom, you smoke, you eat, and it's like, people who are unsuccessful use that information to inform them about themselves. They draw conclusions that they're a loser, and I can't do it. And, they start off with, I'm bad at stopping smoking, and then I'm bad at changing my life, and then I'm just a bad person. They get discouraged. They don't try new efforts, and they end up failing in lots of ways. You have to learn to turn a bad day into good data. You have to learn to turn a bad day into good data. So rather than saying, oh, wow, I just fell off the wagon, I'm a horrible person, you have to say, what happened today? Gee, I was doing just fine. What were the circumstances? This is part of being the scientist and the subject. What are the circumstances that led me to doing the inappropriate behavior, and how do I fix it next time? And you take that bad day and you turn it into good data, you turn it into a new change plan, you adjust, and you move forward.
Kerry, thanks so much for talking to us. I mean, this has been great for me. I'm sure for Chris as well. Our listeners, I'm sure, are going to really enjoy this. Your book, again, is Change Anything, The New Science of Personal Success. And did you have any other areas that you wanted to plug, websites, personal websites, or any other books that are out there?
I'd stick with, we have several books, but let's stick with this one, Change Anything, the one that came out a couple of weeks ago. The website is changeanything.com. We'd be honored to have people give us a look, and I've been honored to be on your program today. Thanks for having me.
All right, Kerry. Thank you so much.
Okay, see you guys.
Welcome back. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Kerry. Hopefully he provided some tools to help you make some changes in your life, whether those changes be big or small. You now have the ability to move forward doing so and making yourself a better person. Just wanted to remind you, check us out at www.smartpeoplepodcast.com, as well on Twitter, Smart People Pod, and Facebook. We're on Smart People Podcast on there. Make sure you contact us, get in touch. We've got a bunch of books laying around that we want to give away. Just mention the free book contest. We'll send you something if we pick your name out.
It's always fun getting a package in the mail. And also, we've been getting emails and comments, constructive criticism and what we do well, and we really enjoy that. It shows us that you guys care and you want us to improve, and we're going to do our best to do so. So we appreciate that. I also want to say, we've been saying it for the past couple episodes, but next weekend, this coming Saturday, is going to be a big episode for us. We interviewed Dr. Gary Chapman, who wrote The 5 Love Languages, which has sold 7 million copies worldwide. It's been translated into 40 languages. And I'll tell you right now, what he says will help you in relationships. If you're married, if you're single, if you're struggling, it will help you, I promise. We talk about how men find it hard to spend quality time and how women get mad at that and how you can fix that. That's just one of many, but it's one that I personally loved. So make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Smart People Podcast. Leave us a rating. Help us out. It's been good spending this time with you. We look forward to this weekend, Saturday, July 2nd.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
Cool.